Chancellor's Forum. I'm Randy Woodson. I'm your Chancellor. This is really an attempt on my part and others to do a better job of keeping the line of communication open among all the constituent groups here at NC State, students, faculty, staff, and so it's a great opportunity for us to keep each other informed, and so I hope we have a number of these over the course of the year and in the coming years. And today, really, there are a couple of goals. The first is for me to spend a little time as your new chancellor talking about some of my early observations after being here for 5 months, and I'm excited to do that, and then to turn the podium over to Provost Warwick Arden to talk about the strategic planning process, which is just getting launched. And before I get started, I want to say a few kudos. Being a father of 3 college children that have gone to college, various colleges, and moved a number of students into colleges over the years, I want to say that this university, through Tom Stafford's leadership and his colleagues in student affairs, does a great job to help our students get into the residence halls and get acclimated to campus. So I was actually blown away by the organization. As I walked around campus and watched this, a parent would pull up in their SUV with all their kids' stuff, and as soon as they opened the door, they would just be swarmed by all of these students in red shirts to help move them away. And they'd unload the car and get it all up into the residence halls, and then the parents were standing there like, what do I do? I mean, I came here to be with Johnny, and you've taken him away. But it really is a testament to the way we feel about our students, and I was very, very impressed. Another big change that occurred over the summer, I think you all know about, is we hired a new athletic director. Debbie Yao is doing a fantastic job, and I think she's solely responsible for an undefeated football team. I'm sure that's not the case, but it is great to see our student athletes engaged both in the classroom and on the field. And I'll talk a little bit more about it in later meetings, but what I'm so impressed by is Debbie's commitment to help our student athletes succeed here as students, in addition to succeed as athletes. If you've not gotten to a volleyball game, our women volleyball team is 8-1. I think that's sort of unheard of. So it's a great testament to what that team is doing. Soccer's up and running. Tennis had a great weekend. So athletics is in great shape, and I'm very excited about that future. We've got a provost search ongoing. I think all of you know about that. And Marjorie Overton, the chair of the Faculty Senate, is leading the search, and I know they're getting very close to identifying candidates that would be invited to campus for visits. So hopefully we will get that position resolved in the coming weeks and months, but certainly this semester, and keep moving forward. Early observations, another kudo. It was kind of hot this summer for a guy moving here from Indiana. But I did grow up in Arkansas, so I have experienced heat and humidity. But our grounds people and our physical plant staff do a terrific job of getting this place ready for all the students to return. And Kevin McNaughton and his colleagues have a great organization, and I'm very proud of what they've done. So the staff here are terrific. We've got a world-class faculty. I see evidence of that every day, and it's a great testament to the quality of the programs here. Just today, the Wall Street Journal came out with a new ranking. I've always said that universities like NC State are much more highly ranked by the recruiters than they are by the academicians. And that was true if you look at the recruiters' ranking of the national universities. And NC State was ranked today by their national recruiters as the 19th best university in the country, which is a great testament. And if you're wondering, Chapel Hill was tied for 25th. just in case you're wondering. But what that says to me is that we do a lot of things right at NC State. And what we particularly do right is we prepare students as career-ready employees. And the recruiters love our product. And so we've got some challenges in terms of being able to continue that high-quality educational experience given the budget challenges. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think it is a great testament, and I'm glad it came out now because as we're out on the recruiting trail, one of the things I'll tell you, when the N&O asked me, how do you feel about the 18% cap on out-of-state enrollment? And I said, I'd love to be there because we're at about 9%, maybe even less, about 7% of our undergraduate enrollment is from out of state. Now, our priority is North Carolina, without a doubt. I mean, this state funds higher education at a very high rate to keep it affordable for North Carolinians. We've got great students, and we've got a lot of them. But I do believe the educational environment at this university is enhanced by having students from around the country. And so as we get about the business of telling students from all over the U.S. that this is one of the best ranked universities in terms of what the employers say about us, and it is, without a doubt, one of the best buys. In fact, of those top 25 universities, Chapel Hill and NC State have the lowest out-of-state tuition. So we are an incredible educational buy, and we just need to keep telling that story. I've met a lot of, over the course of the summer, we've had alumni events all over North Carolina. I've visited, I told the staff I wanted to go to all 100 counties, and they said, you know, stop smoking, and because you're not going to get there in the first year you're here. And so the alternative strategy was for us to visit the 7 economic development regions in the state, which represents all 100 counties. And I met with the boards of all of those economic development regions and learned firsthand the importance of NC State throughout the state of North Carolina, and particularly the importance to the economy of the state. Our alumni, in fact, not even our alumni, what amazes me, I had lunch last week with a couple of friends of NC State. They're friends because they're both Chapel Hill graduates, but their kids came to NC State, and they're just absolutely smitten with this university because of the way we treat students. And again, it's a testament to the faculty and staff that we care about the success of our students, help advise them, and nurture them along the way. So we got a lot of great things going. Now, we do have some challenges, not the least of which is a budget. This is the 3rd year we've not been in a position to raise salaries. That's a challenge for us, and I can tell you other state universities and other private universities are taking advantage of that, and they're working hard to recruit our faculty and staff, so we've got to be attentive to this. It's particularly a challenge in the state of North Carolina because we're one of just a few states that still remain largely state-supported. And what I mean by that is the largest single portion of our budget is from the state of North Carolina, not from the students that pay tuition and fees. That's a great asset for the state. It's very affordable, but the challenge going forward is when you are the only university left in the country that's largely state-supported, when the state budgets are challenged, we're challenged. And that's why you saw when the state couldn't fund us this year, the 3rd or 2nd or 3rd year in a row we had budget challenges, they offered the opportunity for the universities to raise tuition to offset that budget cut. We chose to do so knowing that that would be difficult for our students, and we've tried to engage in that conversation with our students as much as we could. It's done a lot to bolster the budget and to ensure that we can offer the class sections that are critical to keep students on track to graduate. And Provost Arden and Charlie Leffler are working hard to get those resources out into the colleges so that we can keep the university moving forward. But long term, we've got a challenge. And I have no doubt North Carolina continues to want to fund higher education and wants to be the primary source of funding of higher education. But we've got a year, an upcoming year in the legislature that's really going to test the will of the General Assembly and our ability to be responsive, because frankly the removal of the stimulus funding is going to create quite a gap in funding for the state. So stay tuned, but I give Charlie Loeffler and others a lot of credit for preparing, and the deans, frankly, who took a significant budgetary hit last year, that have prepared us to go into this budget in a little better shape, frankly, than many of the universities within the UNC system, and certainly a lot of universities around the country. So I have a lot of confidence that we're going to get through this, but it is going to be another challenging year. You know, one of the things that I said early on, and it was a real driver for my decision to come here, is NC State nationally is viewed as one of the most innovative universities in the country. And an embodiment of that is Centennial Campus and the way we do business on Centennial Campus. We celebrated that this morning, an example of that this morning with the Entrepreneurship Initiative under the leadership of Tom Miller and others. And we launched the first phase of the Garage Project, which is a physical space to bring students together to be entrepreneurs and to develop their ideas, turn them into products, and figure out how to create jobs more than take jobs. And I think that's what NC State does exceptionally well. And I want to keep the university innovative. I want us to be as administrative lean as possible, to empower the faculty and staff to do their job, and to put as much resources as we can into the academy, and we'll keep working on that. Terry Lomax and her colleagues in the research office, and Billy Hotelin and others, are working really hard to make sure that we continue to be seen as one of the most innovative partners for the private sector in the state of North Carolina and in the country. And that is definitely true. We have some areas that I think we can invest a bit more in. In particular, I think the life sciences is a real opportunity for NC State. And we clearly have a lot of strength in the life sciences. They're distributed across the university, but when you look forward over the course of the next century, or at least the first half of the century, there's no doubt that biology is going to drive a lot of technology because of our increased understanding of the genome and the implications of that understanding. So I'm excited to work with the provost and others to think about the best strategy for NC State to continue to be seen as a major player in the life sciences. We don't have to have a medical school to be a major contributor to biological sciences, and we are, in fact, a major contributor. So that's an area that I think has a lot of potential. When you look at the grand challenges that we face as society, I mean, water, climate, feeding a growing population, delivery of health services to a growing population, all of these are challenges that have technological issues embedded in them that we're very good at, and have social implications for those technological solutions that we're also very good at. So NC State, being a university that's history is in the more technical fields of science, but its future has a lot of potential to grow in the social and behavioral sciences and humanity, well, letters and humanities. I see us as this is our time, and we ought to take advantage of it and continue to see what this university can mean to the state and the nation. Engagement is something that NC State has historically done extremely well. Our land-grant university background, extension, industrial extension, I mean, we are among the best in the U.S. But our willingness to partner with the private sector in ways that, frankly, other universities are a little afraid to do is something that I think we have a real opportunity to capitalize on. One example of it, I think many of you may have seen this, a few weeks ago, the Triangle Business Journal did a survey of all of the industries in RTP and said, what's the university that's the most important to your success? And by a long shot, NC State led that survey. So the employers in the Triangle, I'll give you one example, and I won't say who, because this is kind of a public meeting, but a large employer in the Triangle said, Randy, I love your graduates from the College of Management. It's one of the best colleges of management in the country. The students hit the ground running. They're outstanding students. And I said, I know it. The college is young, and it doesn't have the national reputation it deserves, but it will have soon. And he said, oh, please don't do that. Don't enhance the reputation of the college. And I thought, okay, now what is driving this? And he said, I don't want competition for the product. Well, I want him to have competition. And our students, it is a great college, and it's one example of that here at the university. So we have a long history of partnering with the private sector. It informs the educational mission of the university. It helps us to prepare students that are attractive to recruiters, like we just saw today in Wall Street Journal. So we're doing a lot of those things very well. A couple of issues that we're going to have to work through. Our faculty is not big enough for the size of the enrollment of the university. We've grown the enrollment. We've enjoyed growing the enrollment because we've been paid to grow the enrollment. At least some years we've been paid by the state. But that's caused us to be a little stressed in terms of delivering on our educational mission. Classes are too large. We don't have enough small classes. It's affected our reputational ranking in U.S. News and World Report. I am not a guy that will manage towards rankings, but those rankings do reveal challenges. And they tell us that over the last 5 or 10 years, as we've grown enrollment, we've crept up in the size of our classes. We haven't been able to keep class sizes small enough, and that does affect the educational delivery here at NC State. So it's something we have to pay a bit of attention to. Our student-to-faculty ratio is not so out of line with our peers, but it is in certain areas, particularly the high-growth areas. And it's something that I know if Damian Shea were sitting here, and he may be, and he's going to jump up, I can't believe the Chancellor said it. But, you know, biology, we've got 2,300 undergraduates studying biology at NC State. And we've just got to pay attention to the distribution of our students, the distribution of the research opportunities, and where we have opportunities to grow our faculty. We've got to figure out how to pay for it, but I'm excited to think through those things. The other thing that I think is critical to the success of NC State going forward is to grow the endowment. Now, our endowment is one of the smallest in our peer group, and at $450 million, it should be above $1 billion. And it's something that it's tough for a chancellor to make it a priority because it's investing for the future. But it's important to this institution that we invest in the future. And 25 years from now, we need to have one of the leading endowments in our peer group so that these budgetary waves that we tend to ride will be a little more tempered. And so Nevin Kessler and the deans and the development officers in each of the colleges are working hard to develop a strategy to grow our endowment with our future capital campaign. And we just need to keep telling the story to get people to invest in the university. We have opportunities to grow our research. That comes with growth in faculty and staff, but it's something that we've got to pay attention to. I've touched on rankings a little bit. I'm not going to harp on this, but I don't think any of us were excited to see NC State drop out of the top 100 in U.S. News and World Report. It's not who we are. It doesn't reflect the quality of the institution. It doesn't reflect the quality of the faculty and the students, and it's something that we've got to pay attention to. Now, you can ask, why did that happen? There are a couple of reasons, potentially. Actually, our reputational ranking didn't change. It hasn't changed, in fact, in the last 10 years. We've been steady with regard to the way the presidents, chancellors, and provosts and deans of admission think about us. But they added a new one this year. They asked high school counselors around the country, what do you think of NC State? They don't know us. They don't know us because we don't enroll students from across the country. Now, they need to know us. not because we need to grow our out-of-state enrollment necessarily, but because this is an incredible educational buy. I beat that horse. It's dead. Can I say that in front of vet? Oh, I'm sorry. The other areas that we've been compromised in relative to our peers is those that reflect the educational atmosphere. And what I mean by that is class size. The number of classes under 20, the number of classes over 50 are going in the wrong direction for us. And it's something we have to pay a bit of attention to. That's money, but we do need to think through it. Another area that Nevin's on top of is we slipped, although it's a small part of the ranking, but we slipped in terms of the percentage of our alumni that give back to the university. We actually probably didn't dramatically slip. We just are actually counting things a little more accurately right now. Is that fair to say, Nevin? Come on, we got to be transparent here. Yes, sir. So we need to work on this and convince our colleagues and people that love NC State, and there are a lot that do love us, to help us build a world-class university with their contributions. Good news, Benny Suggs is here, and he's on top of it. The Alumni Association membership is up 5%, 10%, what? 5.5. I don't know how you do the point, 5.5. I guess that's Morse code. So alumni membership is up. We've got people excited about NC State. Everywhere I go, people are energized about the future of this institution, and we're going to keep working hard at it. Now we're going to do some strategic planning. Okay. Look, I was as cynical as all of you as a faculty member about strategic planning, but this is God's work. I am a convert to believing that if you clearly articulate measurable goals and you keep track of those goals year in and year out, people will respond. And so this isn't about creating a plan that sits on a shelf. This really is about creating a plan that has measurable outcomes, sets lofty goals, holds people accountable for those goals across the university, and we set out to build on what is already a world-class university. It's a big process, and that's because we got a lot of folks. And I'm not interested in having a plan that's created in the back room of Holiday Hall with a few of us. So I'm interested in having a process that engages the campus community, and it's going to do that. And at the end of the day, I hope you'll all partake of and participate in some of the sessions that are held by the various task forces, because at the end of this academic year, before the end of this academic year, I expect us to really clearly be articulating where NC State is headed, and there won't be huge surprises there, except to say that you can count on me working with the others in Holiday Hall to deliver the resources against that plan and to resource the plan in a way that allows the university to meet its targeted goals. And there's some areas that we've got to be stronger in. Graduate education is one. This is a research-intensive university, in case y'all hadn't noticed. And one of the ways that benefits the country is that we're heavily engaged in training at the highest level the workforce for the future. And NC State has the capacity and the intellectual capacity to be one of the largest producers of PhDs and other graduate degrees in the country. And now that's not to say, and we already are one of the best and largest producer of baccalaureate degrees in the country. So with that, you may have an ultimate, just an overwhelming desire to ask your chancellor something. And we can do a little bit of questions now, but I'm going to stay here throughout, and we'll definitely have time at the end to have overarching questions. So if it can wait, we'll do it at the end, but if there's some dying question now that I've said something that has stimulated your thought process and you need to ask me something before Provost Harden comes up. Any questions for me right now? Yes.
Yes. A few weeks ago, a fence was erected in the Lake Raleigh Woods Nature Preserve, which is protected by both student and faculty Senate resolutions. This is surrounding your new residence, and
It's not my new residence.
Oh, excuse me. The new Chancellor's residence. Yeah. And it seems that they have a plan to destroy this part of the nature preserve and put in a thing called the Point. And I'm just quite concerned about this as an alum. And I'd like to get your feelings on this and what it makes NC State look like in the world and our dedication to sustainability, that we are destroying one of our greatest natural resources here. And that's it.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, the overarching theme for that project is to do everything possible to preserve the natural resources. In fact, the landscape will be entirely sustainable, and there's an effort to make it one of the most green facilities on this campus. With regard to the fence, I suspect that's more about the construction, but I'll ask Charlie if he knows. I don't know about the fence.
It's a fence that is intended to keep the deer out, frankly, as well as the structure protection. But you may recall that the original master plan for the Centennial Campus actually developed that entire parcel of land as multi-family housing as part of housing. We backed away from that, with the exception of the resident site. The resident site was never part of the reserve plan.
Right. That was the compromise to get the resolutions passed, was that the Chancellor's residence would be able to be located there. That was the compromise. So
I'm not aware of any change to the...
Yeah, I'm just asking about the point of the point, kind of.
The point of the point?
If it's going to be sustainable, why are we taking out a nature preserve to prove our sustainability?
Look, I wasn't here when I don't know about the resolutions. I'm not sure what the resolutions were that you're referring to, but apparently there was an agreement that that tract of land would be used for a new Chancellor's residence. And is that true?
Yes, that was the compromise to get the resolutions passed, was that the Chancellor's residence would be located there. This
and
is
do
an
you feel that
area.
we're going against that resolution now?
Yes, I do. Yes, very strongly I do. That this new area that is being usurped or taken over is the nature preserve. This is so important. This is one of the most beautiful habitats in all of the Piedmont. I have lived here my entire life. I went to preschool on Avon Ferry. I went to college here. I went to high school here. I have lived here for all my life. This is the most beautiful land and nature preserve in the entire Piedmont. We should be holding this up and showing everyone how great NC State is for preserving this, not taking it piece by piece by piece and waiting for people to move on until we forget about it, and then eventually it will be gone.
Well, my impression is that we're working hard to preserve a fair amount of that area, and I don't know about the original agreements that led to the project, except to say that in the course of running this university and trying to build on the success of this university, Chancellor's residence is a big part of the fundraising activity of NC State. And so I'm sure that was some of the decisions that went into building that, and apparently there were resolutions that at least approved of that process. So I don't see us backing away. In fact, one of the things that I've been amazed by is the willingness to put into that project very expensive technologies and processes to ensure that the habitat is as least impacted as possible. The parking areas, for example, will be entirely infiltrated, allow infiltration of water. It's going to be one of the greenest buildings we have on campus for sure, with geothermal heating. So there's a lot of attempts to put in place technologies that will actually speak to the need to preserve our natural surroundings.
Thank you. I hope we keep up those motives. Thank you.
Okay. Provost Sergeant.
Thanks, folks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chancellor. And just a quick comment. For those of you who haven't been to the renovated Thompson Hall before, I strongly encourage you to come and see one of our student performances in this or the other theaters. They're truly remarkable, and our students do a phenomenal job. So this is a great facility, and I really recommend that you take advantage of it. It's my pleasure this afternoon to talk briefly about strategic planning, and what I'm going to do is walk us through very quickly the strategic planning process as it's played out over the summer, and then talk a little bit about the task forces as they're just being formed now. And as you'll see, it's a fairly rigorous agenda to make sure that we get through everything that we need to get through in the next year. But I personally consider it to be an extremely important part of what we have to accomplish this year. The Chancellor has said that he's a relatively recent convert to strategic planning. I'm also a fairly recent convert for perhaps slightly different reasons. Having been on this campus for about 6 years now, five years as a dean, about a year in this position, I can tell you that I so frequently would like to have a more precise roadmap of where we're going as an institution and a way to guide some of the decisions that we have to make every day in terms of our investments and where we're headed. And so I'm really excited about this process. I think, as the Chancellor has said, that if we can develop a really good strategic plan, which is both a combination of being aspirational on one side and a clear roadmap with metrics on the other side, then we'll have accomplished something very, very significant for this university. So I'm very excited about the process. We began the process this summer back in June, and the Chancellor launched the Strategic Planning Initiative. He asked myself and Marjorie Overton, the chair of the faculty, to lead the process, and we're very pleased to do so. We began by having a plan-to-plan team, and on that team were, in addition to Marjorie and myself, Karen Helm, Marvin Malika, Charlie Leffler, Terry Lomax, Mark Hoyt, and Joe Heiss. And the plan-to-plan team was brought together to look at the overall design of the process and make sure that we had a process that was a very inclusive process. This was always something the Chancellor really emphasized to me very early on. In his own words, you've heard him say he didn't want this to be a plan that was developed in the back rooms of Holiday Hall and dropped down on the university. This really had to be a plan that was our plan, NC State's plan, a plan that was developed with input from our faculty, from our staff, from our students, and really embodied where we're headed as a university. And so transparency, openness, inclusion, we've really tried to build into the fundamental aspects of developing this plan. The Strategic Planning Steering Committee was formed in July, and we began by having a University Council retreat. And at that retreat, it was a really interesting retreat, because one thing that we decided to do was, rather than just having everybody walk in cold, to send out a pre-retreat survey to begin stimulating people's thoughts about what were really the top things that were on their minds, just asking them to put down 1, 2, 3, 4, here are the top things on my mind on given issues. And then we had an outside contractor come in, assemble those things together, and present those ideas that were emerging as the most important themes for us to wrestle with. Not necessarily a direction, but simply these are themes that we need to wrestle with as a community and make some progress on. And so after the retreat, the steering committee, and I'll talk a little bit about the steering committee in just a moment, finalized the strategic issues, tried to bring those common themes that were brought together at a retreat together, define what the task forces were going to be, identify members and the charges to the task forces, and review the communication plan that we were going to build around the strategic planning process. Because this truly is a process, and making sure that it's a two-way communication plan, making sure that this isn't something that is developed even by the committees that are formed, the task forces that are formed, and then sent out to the campus community, that we constantly go back and forth. It's an iterative process, receive input on the drafts, and incorporate that input into the plan as we develop the plan was really important. As we go into August and September, we formed 9 task forces, and the task forces are listed there, and I'll refer to them in a little bit more detail in just a moment. Undergraduate student success, graduate and postdoctoral program development, faculty excellence, research and scholarship, comprehensiveness and interdisciplinarity, global engagement and competitiveness, partnership, innovation and entrepreneurship, campus culture and community, and resource strategies. And I think you can see that this is a little bit different to some of the strategic plan topics that have emerged before. In a lot of ways previously, we've been very program-oriented in our plans and said that we should be addressing, for example, health and well-being or educational innovation or energy and the environment. Those things are all very important, and they have informed, I think, a lot of our programmatic thinking as an institution. I think this time we're starting to look at issues which are cross-cutting across campus and will really help to a large degree inform us about how we do our business as an academic community. It's perhaps a little bit more inwardly focused in as much as, yes, we know we have to address the major issues of the day, but the question really becomes, how do we do that as an academic community most efficiently, most effectively? How do we refine our processes, and how do we make ends towards those strategic goals? We solicited input from the University Council as to who could serve or should serve on those task forces. I was really pleased to see that we had over 400 names submitted to serve on those task forces. And then the steering committee worked with those 400 names to try and derive committees that were very balanced. So we've just finalized those committees over the last couple of days. And there'll be approximately, I think we've got up there 150, but 160 individuals will be serving on those committees with, I feel, very good representation from across faculty, staff, and student bodies and from across each of the colleges. Going forward, September, October, November, there's going to be a lot of work in the coming months. The task forces will be at work, working on each of their individual issues. It is going to be incumbent on each of the task forces to do several things. It's not going to be a matter of working in isolation. It is going to be incumbent on each of the task forces to reach out to the campus community and continue to solicit input on what they feel will be relevant to their particular task force issue. It will also be really important for each task force to have a couple of things in mind as they move forward. Number one is to have very firm metrics about how do we define success. Not only what are we defining, for example, if we deal with undergraduate student success, but how do we measure it? What do we measure it? When are we going to measure? How are we going to measure our progress towards goals? I think defining the metrics that surround each of these task force issues is going to be very, very important. We also have to think in terms of each of these task forces. Although there is one task force called resource strategies, I think each task force is going to have to think about where are the resources going to come from to enable us to achieve these goals, and how do we incorporate those resource strategies into our particular task force plan to accomplish our goals. The Task Force Planning Committee, in the meantime, during this period of time, is hopefully not going to be twiddling its thumbs. We found out at the retreat, one thing that really surprised me a little bit at the University Council retreat is I had thought that most folks at the retreat would say that our mission statement was fine. Let's not mess with our mission statement too much. It's okay, let's move on. What I found is that most folks didn't think that our mission statement was fine. In fact, most folks thought that our mission statement needed a lot of work, and so there was some discussion as we would actually have a task force working specifically on the mission statement. Then we realized probably the best way for that to occur would be if the steering committee and the full strategic planning committee would work on that at the same time as the task forces were working on their agendas. So trying to bring those things together, going back and forth to the campus community, really trying to refine our mission statement, which says a lot about who we are as an academic community. And it is also the plan of the Chancellor to have a forum associated with his installation on October 26th, a town hall style meeting, to gain input not just on the strategic plan, but on a number of issues across campus. But certainly the strategic plan and strategic planning process will be one of the issues that we'll be talking about associated with the town hall installation. In December, we're hoping to have the task force reports back to the Strategic Planning Committee and begin to assemble those task force reports in January into a cohesive strategic plan. One of the things that I think would be unfortunate if we simply took 9 task force reports and sort of stuck them together and said, here's our strategic plan. There is absolutely no doubt that the nuts and bolts of this will be in the task forces, with the task forces working to define their topic areas, gain input, and write very precise strategies. But then we have to, in some way, put an overarching document together that really defines the commonalities of those task forces and the strategic thrusts over the coming years. I see the task force reports as being addenda or important parts of the final document, but there should be an overarching element to this that attempts to join the key components out of the task force reports. And so December and January is going to be a busy time, I think, for many of us. As we go forward, January and early February, once again, we want to come back to the campus community with this draft report. We don't simply want to send it through a series of reviews. We want to come back to the campus community. I look at this period of January and early February as being what I call the open comment period. This is a period where we'll be going before the faculty senate, the staff senate, the student senate. It'll be out on our website. It'll be discussed at a number of different forums, including the Chancellor's Forum on January 27th. This is our time to gather input on that draft strategic plan and make fairly significant modifications to the plan if necessary. By late February, the Strategic Planning Committee will consider the input, revise the draft, and hopefully present that to the Chancellor towards the end of February or beginning of March. During March, the Chancellor will review the draft plan, provide further input and help make modifications, and then we'll review the strategic plan with the Board of Trustees in April. We'll incorporate their final recommendations and revisions, and then hopefully have it in final format to the board by June. Now, that all seems a pretty rigorous agenda, but I think it really is important to try to get this done and fairly well lock down this academic year so that we can go into the next academic year, the next budget year, really understanding where our priorities are going to be for the next 3 to 5 years and how we're going to expend our resources for the next several years. Excuse me. The Strategic Planning Committee, I thought you'd want to know who was on the committee. The full committee is going to include the members of the steering committee and 1 or 2 others who I'll mention in just a moment, and then all 19 chairs of the task forces will be on the full Strategic Planning Committee. So this will be a large committee that will be working together quite intensively over the next 6, 7, 8 month period. So in addition to Marjorie and myself, John Cavanagh from Biochemistry, Randy Colby, Chair of the Staff Senate, Karen Helm, Director of Planning Analysis, Mark Hoyt, Vice Chancellor for IT, Kelly Hook, our Student Body President, serves on the steering committee, Terry Lomax, Ben Jenkins, who is Chair of the Audit, Finance and Planning Committee for our Board of Trustees, will be on the full Planning Committee, Ali Kafeli, who is President of the Graduate Student Association, Marv Malika, Dean of Design, Benny Suggs, representing our alumni, Walt Wolfram from the Department of English, and then, as I've said, all 19 co-chairs of the task forces. All right, I'm going to spend a few minutes on the task forces. I don't want to go into detail on the task forces, just give a brief overview. The first task force that we defined was undergraduate student success. It was really interesting at the retreat that of all of the things that we discussed, this topic came to the top every time in almost every discussion. There was almost no doubt that this would be a task force. There was a feeling that while we do a great job in undergraduate education right now, we're still not where we need to be. There are many, many issues to consider, both academic and non-academic student support issues. It is far more than just simply graduation and retention rates. It is really all about how do we prepare a student body that is really ready to enter the workforce, make significant contributions to our society, and how do we do that in the most effective manner possible. There are many, many embedded issues here. And what I really need to emphasize is that you'll see under each of these task forces a number of bullet points. I want to emphasize that the task forces will have the authority to change, modify, include more bullet points here as sub-themes of the task forces. These are not meant to be limiting factors or sub-themes. They're meant to be simply a starting point for each of the task forces. I want to thank Maxine Atkinson, Joanne Cohen, and Mary Cobb Randall is our student representative leading this task force. We have 3 co-chairs of this particular task force. I think there's a tremendous amount that this task force can accomplish in the coming several months. The second task force for consideration is graduate and postdoctoral program development. Our co-chairs there are Aubrey Yeager and Barb Sherry. We know as an institution that one of the directions that we need to take is to put a little more emphasis on growing our graduate programs, growing the quality of our graduate programs, linking that to the quality and scope of our research programs. I think this is going to be a very, very exciting task force. One of the things that is going to be important, I mentioned about making sure that we include the financial component of each of these issues. One of the things that we're dealing with now as we plan tuition, as we plan enrollment increase, is how do we fund and how do we most effectively utilize our graduate student support plan. If we're going to move in this direction, we have to make sure that we have the facilities and the ability to attract, retain, and enable the best graduate students in this country to come to NC State and be successful. So there's a lot to consider here under graduate and postdoctoral program development. The next task force will be faculty excellence. The co-chairs there will be Trudy Mackay and Dan Solomon. There is no doubt, I think, that as an institution, we could be doing more to grow the strength of our already excellent faculty and enable faculty success. If we look over time, we probably, as the Chancellor has said, haven't put enough resources into ensuring this element of our academic core, ensuring that we are recruiting and retaining the very best faculty to come to NC State, ensuring that we're enabling the faculty that we have to be optimally successful, making sure that we remove obstacles and barriers from success, and ensuring that we have a supportive environment for our faculty to be effective in. So I think this will be a really exciting task force. The next task force is going to be research and scholarship. That'll be co-chaired by David Threadgill, head of genetics, and Greg Parsons from the College of Engineering. Once again, the issue is how do we grow our research programs? How do we increase the scope of our research programs, the relevance of our research programs? We're doing extraordinarily well in some areas. We're doing less well in other areas. There are certainly programmatic areas that we need to emphasize that have not coalesced well over the last several years, and there are other areas that are doing extraordinarily well. So how do we spread that success across our whole research enterprise? I think this is also going to be an interesting conversation. The next task force is comprehensiveness and interdisciplinarity. These are 2 large themes that I do think belong together to a certain degree. How do we define what comprehensiveness is for this institution? People use the term comprehensiveness a lot, but it has different meanings at every institution. What does it mean for NC State? What is the role of the arts, design, humanities, social sciences? We have great traditional strengths in the STEM disciplines. How do we utilize and leverage those strengths and develop other strengths across campus? Interdisciplinarity, we've talked about as the campus community for some time. How do we ensure that we take what has traditionally been a great strength of this university, which is our very, very strong college base, and extend that into a domain where we really can develop programs, both academic programs and research programs, that reach across traditional budgetary and college domains. I think this is going to be one of the keys for our success in the future. The next one that I want to talk about is global engagement and competitiveness. This is going to be co-chaired by Mike Giancola from CSLEPS and Dan Robeson from Natural Resources. We know that as a university we have to be positioned to take advantage of the changes that are occurring around the world, not only to be visible internationally, but most importantly, to give our faculty and our students international skills, global skills, and equip them for a place in the global workplace. This is and is going to remain incredibly important. You know, over the last 15 months, we undertook a study, a fairly extensive study, which consumed a lot of time to look at establishing an international branch campus. One of the things that always struck me about that project was that we'd really never had the discussion, where does the branch campus fit in terms of our strategic plan for globalization? What do we mean by globalization, and what are the most cost-effective ways of achieving the endpoints of globalization? And so where does a branch campus or any other model fit into that plan? The next one is partnerships, innovation, and entrepreneurship. That's going to be co-chaired by Ted Baker and Blanton Godfrey. As the Chancellor has said, Centennial Campus has become a national hallmark for partnership and for innovation. We want to make sure that that continues, but we also want to make sure that that essence of innovation, something that NC State is known for and should be continued to be known for, is across the whole campus, not just across Centennial Campus. And so we anticipate that that will be a very important task force. Campus community and culture is going to be co-chaired by Jose Picard and Caroline Argentotti. It's going to be very, very important that we as a campus community communicate with one another and recognize each other's strengths towards working towards these strategic goals. That has to be an integral part of who we are as a campus, that everybody who walks onto this campus is embraced for the strengths that they bring to this campus. And I think this is going to be an important task force. Lastly, resource strategies. At the end of the day, we've got to figure out how to pay for all of this. Where is the money going to come from? This is a changing budgetary environment. We know, as the Chancellor has said, we have been the beneficiaries of a very generous system of state support. But during difficult budgetary times, that is challenged, and our budgets are very, very labile at the moment, depending on how state revenues are doing. How do we diversify our resource portfolio? How do we add new elements to our resource portfolio? And as much as anything, we have to be willing to reallocate the resources that we have versus simply saying, where do we get more or new money to do the new things that we want to do? This has to be an embedded part of each strategic plan, but we felt that it was important enough that it should be its own strategic goal. That's going to be co-chaired by David Bristol and Roby Sawyers. Okay, so there is full information on the strategic plan and strategic planning process on our website at info.ncsu.edu strategic planning. We hope to have the full names of the task forces up within a day or so. So this really is going to be an open process that we need and want your input on. So to those of you who are on the task forces, thank you. To those of you who have agreed to chair the task forces, double, triple thank you. It's going to be, I think, a fun 6 months and really looking forward to the end results of it. With that, I've left a few minutes at the end, probably not enough, but a few minutes for either questions for the Chancellor or I on strategic planning or other issues. Yes, sir. The question is, do we do a peer assessment? Very early on, and the Plan-to-Plan Committee did do a sort of a landscape scan and pulled several strategic plans and recent strategic plans from other institutions. And all major institutions have done strategic plans within the last several years, but we looked at some of the more recent ones. And the model of going out and developing task forces and trying to include broad representation across the university is one that several other universities have utilized. Our Chancellor has utilized this before in strategic planning at a previous institution. I think the advantage is that it really gives us the broad representation that we need. So yes, there are other universities using a very similar model of strategic planning. Come on.
No? Come on. Raj?
Are we going to be having folks from task forces that are largely just from the university, or are they from outside the university that be engaged in that dialogue as well?
It's a really good question, and nearly all of the individuals are from the university. Now, there will be outside representation in terms of each task force will be asked to reach out to its constituents, including both its internal and external constituents. We, of course, have representation from the Board of Trustees on the Strategic Planning Committee. But this is quite a point of discussion that we went through. We felt that with all the work that had been done in the past for the UNC Tomorrow study, which was very, very externally focused, with the development of the NC State response to the UNC Tomorrow study, we'd really gone through a tremendous amount of external engagement and getting external input. And we really wanted this plan to take that and build on that and focus a little bit more on how do we do our business? How do we really become the great university that we can become? And so this is a little bit more inwardly focused, and so we didn't put external members directly on those task forces.
Very, very little. Don't count on my installation speak to be our strategic plan. That would be presumptuous. But to the extent that, I think you will get a good sense of some of my thinking in that installation. But it clearly, we won't have a full roadmap until this plan is complete.
Yes.
So what happens from here? The chairs notify committee members, and the committee decide on schedule, or how are things going to move forward?
Okay, so all of the members of the task forces have already been notified and agreed to serve on those task forces, and we'll be publishing those full task forces. Each task force is somewhere between 15 and 20 individuals. It will be largely up to the chairs and the task force members to do their scheduling and be responsible for engagement of the stakeholders as well. Now, the Office of Planning and Analysis, Karen Helm, and my office will work closely with each of the task forces, but there won't be one central scheduling for each of the task forces. We think there has to be enough flexibility left at the local level to ensure that.
I intend to interact with all of the chairs as we launch it. And to Raj, to your question, I would expect almost all of these task forces to have some sort of open process where others that have an interest in the area are invited to give comment and have feedback. The partnership area is one great example. We can't do that without partners being engaged in that conversation. The businesses we work with, the economic development partners across the state. So, but that's going to be each task force will have the opportunity to think about how they do that.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to sleep with it.
That's a great question. And I think the reason historically that some of us, maybe even many of us, have been a little bit jaundiced by strategic planning or any form of planning is we've seen some some beautiful documents sit on the shelf and collect dust over the years. And the reality is the only way this will be, well, I think a good start, number one, is the Chancellor's vision that this is an inclusive document that represents broad input from the campus community and is simply not an administratively conceived document dropped down on the campus community, I think makes a huge difference, because that means there is a high level of ownership from the campus community as a whole. So I think that's step one. Step two, quite frankly, is that I think that it has to be linked to resource allocation. We really, in the past, planning has been linked via the compact plan process. We haven't devised exactly now whether we'll continue or change the compact planning process, but we do have to link resource allocation and reallocation to the strategic priorities that we list. Absolutely.
So the only thing I'll add to that is I fully expect this plan to have clear, measurable outcomes and metrics associated with it. So the way the plan continues to be a living document is we constantly talk about where we are. If a plan is a roadmap, you need to constantly measure how far you're getting toward that final destination. And that's a data-intensive process. In fact, we'll continue to have conversations with all the deans and department heads and unit leaders, directors about, where we are in the journey. And when you do that, you're constantly referring to the plan. And a plan that's so data-intensive can't sit on the shelf because you're always pulling it off to refer to where you are in the journey. So we're not going to just stand up and say we're going to be the best land-grant university in the country. We're going to say how to measure that. What are the numbers associated with it? What is our goal for faculty to student ratio by discipline? I mean, we're going to have data associated with this that I'm a real anal retentive guy. And I use, that's a Freudian term, that's okay. And I like to use real analytical tools to help us know where we are on the journey.
And recommended the first draft of the task force members. We spent about another 10 days going over that, modifying it, and ensuring that we had a really good representation. Representation from faculty, students, staff, administrators, representation from all of the colleges, very good diversity representation across the task forces. We've tried really hard to make it a combination of those who will bring experience and skill to each of those task forces, but to have really good representation from across the various areas of campus. Now, I won't stand here and tell you it's perfect, but I will tell you that we've put a fair bit of work into trying to make sure that this is truly a representative process. Yes, sir. I should punt that one right to Kelly Hook, your student body president. So, Kelly, the question was, how are the students going to be involved in the strategic planning process? Do you want to answer it, or do you want me to answer that? Please.
I think you said so yourself earlier that communication strategy is based on each individual task force, but the student government specifically will be putting pressure on each task force to make sure. But student government specifically will be going to each task force and making sure that they are reaching out to students and that they have a solid structure in place and communication strategy to reach out to them.
The Kelly and the graduate student president are on the steering committee. There are students represented on each of these task forces, and one of the students is Mary Carl is co-chairing the undergraduate student success committee. So this has been very important to us to have significant involvement of the student body, and then we'll work back through the student body president and the student senate to engage the student body as we move through the process.
But students aren't on faculty excellence campuses.
Okay.
I'm told, I don't know the exact number, but that there are over 20 students that are members of the various task forces. So student engagement is a big priority for me.
Yes.
I was involved in a process similar to this at NC State probably longer ago than I came in. And there was a set of planning task force, and the year after that was implementation task force.
Oh, God.
And well,
Yeah.
my observation is when I think back on that process, I don't think it would have been worth having a planning task force if we didn't follow that up with a set of task force that read those plans and said, if we take this at face value, what are the steps that should be taken to make this happen? So I'll just make that as
No, that's very valid.
it's not
I'm-
the goal requires resources. Sometimes it's a change in the policy.
Yep.
If,
We got enough of those. The executive officers know how I feel about. So one of the things that I hope this isn't out of the realm of possibility, but I think one of the things that, and I'm not sure how much we've talked about this, but I think it would be important for every task force to think about the resource implications for what they're proposing. And they may not be fully empowered to do that. There may need to be subsequent study. So, you know, I'm not sure how much further we would go with implementation groups, but I don't expect any plan to come out of this that hasn't been thought about in terms of resources and impediments. No, you've it's
I think
already duly
I think
noted.
it's too late, right. Well, your fundamental point, which is that you can develop a great plan, and you can even link it to resource allocation, but frequently we don't go back and check were those resources utilized appropriately, and did they have the desired result? Did they move us in the correct direction? I think the Chancellor's concept of having this very metrics-driven of each task force and the overall plan saying, this is the end point, this is the goals, this is how we're going to know whether we're getting there or not. And then it's incumbent upon us, and whether that is an implementation task force or whether it is a group of administrators and faculty, is incumbent upon us to go and look at those metrics and I think be very honest with ourselves. Is this driving things in the direction that we anticipated and wanted at the rate that we wanted? Absolutely.
And you got to remain open to mid-course corrections, too.
Go ahead. One in the back there, Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to offer a suggestion that with respect to strategic planning, too often, or one of the failings of many strategic plans is strategic plans end up being sort of this wish list. All these new programs, this is where we'd like to go. And as Chancellor Woodson has noted, you know, things like our faculty numbers, class size ratios, and so on, these are real issues that need to be addressed. We can have this goal that we're going to solve this problem, but I guess I would like to encourage each of the task forces to spend some time looking at why we got to where we are. Because if we just have this idea of a plan of what's going to magically solve some problem, I think we sometimes are going to miss the important historical analysis that helps us think about how we got to where we currently are so that we can get to where we want to be. So I'd just like to throw out that I'd like to see each of the task forces have some historical analysis of what got us to where we are and where are we going from here.
Those are good points. Thanks, Jim. I think we had one more over here.
This being an election year, one of the biggest ideas of talking about immigration. In this state, we have over 20 million, and a lot of them are well-educated, brilliant young men and women. We're going to address them as part of this task force also.
So the question is, will we address immigrants? I hope that's addressed in multiple elements. It's not drawn out as a specific task force or a theme in its own right. But as you'll see, a lot of these task forces are very cross-cutting themes. And I think that there is room within many, if not most, to have themes such as addressing the role of immigrants, the role of new citizens, a number of different issues. So I would hope that that is addressed in multiple formats in several task forces.
let's hope there's a successful DREAM Act. Oh, I guess I just exposed my politics. You know, one of the things that astounded me a bit is the conversation about charging international students more for being here. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because the federal government doesn't, in fact, subsidize higher education. You know, so if your federal taxes don't go to support the university directly, they go to support Pell Grants and grants to students, which international students are not eligible for. But I don't view international students, which is, I know not where you were going, but it's a piece of the overall diversity on our campus. I just don't view international students differently than I view a student from Arkansas, which is like another country. Oh, come on, I'm from Arkansas. Thank you all.